With the new league year set to kick off, let's check in on the Bills' AFC East rivals and other top contenders in the AFC today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I am your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, folks, welcome in. It's going to be a busy week. The new league year starts this week. The legal tampering period starts on Monday afternoon. Players are going to be signing with new teams. The Bills are going to get some new players. They're going to make moves. It's going to be busy, and it's going to be fun. And so just want to start this conversation today by acknowledging the dynamics of this week. A lot of moving parts. And so just be aware that the posting times of podcasts will be super inconsistent, but we'll have at least one episode for you every single day as I try to keep up with the news, try to take some time and analyze it and break it down, and then record and publish podcasts for you all week long. And some of it's a little bit tricky because you just never know at what point in the day the news cycle is going to end. And the reality is the news cycle doesn't end. It's just a matter of, can I pick the right time to stop and record and publish before the next big domino falls? And so just be aware of those dynamics this week. It's going to be fun, and it'd be a great week to make sure that you are part of the Locked On Bills subtext community. It's something that we've been doing for almost a year now. It's been unbelievable, so much fun. What it is text messaging with me, one-on-one text messaging where you can ask questions about the Bills. We can talk Bills football. I'm just a text message away, but also I send out my first reaction to all Bills news to the subtext subscribers through a text message. And that's going to happen a lot this week. And so if you want those updates, if you want my first reaction, be sure to join the Locked On Bills subtext community. There is a link in the show notes for today's episode. So if you're on YouTube or wherever you listen to this podcast, click on those show notes, join the Locked On Bills subtext community, and stay on top of everything that's happening. And you get my first reaction. We could talk about the different transactions and stuff like that as well. It also gets you access to our Discord channel, where we've got 500-600 Bills fans in there talking Bills, talking NFL draft, Sabres, general NFL, all kinds of fun stuff. So not only do you get the one-on-one text messaging, but you get that community dynamic. And folks, it's just way better than social media. Social media is a dumpster fire. It's not fun. We have good conversations in our Discord channel among Bills fans, and we learn a lot from each other, and we have fun. So check it out, Locked On Bills subtext community, link in today's show notes to join. All right, so with that out of the way, let's get into today's topic, which is the Bills' rivals, the AFC East, the Bengals, the Chiefs. You know, the Bills are going to start their next effort to go on a Super Bowl run, the 2024 season. Step one is winning your division, right? That's step one in doing that, is winning your division. So I want to be mindful of the dynamics of the Dolphins and the Jets and the Patriots. We're going to break that down. And then I feel like the other two teams, the Chiefs and the Bengals, you know, what's going on with them? So I want to get into those dynamics here. And, you know, we've talked all about the Bills' problems. We've talked all about the Bills' opportunities. And so let's give the other teams just a little bit of time today so that we can be aware of this AFC landscape and what these other teams are trying to get done, and, you know, what they're going to try to do to either get ahead of the Bills or keep the Bills below them. And obviously in the case of the Chiefs. So that's our topic today. One piece of news that came out over the weekend that I want to acknowledge right now is the official draft picks came out. We know exactly where the Bills are picking. They have 11 draft picks, which was always our expectation. But the compensatory pick did not land where we anticipated. So the Bills draft picks are round 1, pick 28, round 2, pick 60. No third-round pick. They traded away their third-round pick for Rasul Douglas. The expectation was that the Bills would get a third-round compensatory pick for the loss of Tremaine Edmonds. It came in the 4th round. And so the Bills have round 4, 127, round 4, pick 133. They have 3 picks in the 5th round, 143, 159, 162, 3 picks in the 6th round, 195, 199, 203, and then 7th round, pick 248. So what happened with the Tremaine Edmonds pick being a 4th round pick and not the expected 3rd round pick? I don't have an answer for you. Everyone's expectation was a 3rd round pick. All the people who spend time studying this and forecasting compensatory picks said the Bills were going to get a 3. Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager, spoke openly multiple times about his expectation of it being a 3. It comes in as a 4. I don't know what to tell you. I wish I had a clear answer for you. The NFL compensatory pick formula is the net loss of free agents in versus out. There's different things that factor into it, including playing time, accolades, all kinds of different stuff. But even through all of that, the expectation was a 3, comes in as a 4, and it's no small deal, right? I mean, you thought you had a top 100 pick. Instead, you get, pick 133. I don't know what to say. It's disappointing. It feels like a gut punch. It felt like you were going to be able to get 3 players in the top 100, and you're not going to. And for me, if this does anything, is it opens my appetite even more for the Bills to trade back from pick 28. Now, obviously, you got to see who's on the board. You can't make that decision right now, but I'm certainly thinking about it. You want to move back from 28, recoup that 3, and then you have all this additional draft capital. You've got 3 5s, 3 6th-round picks, 2 in the 4th round. Use that to then move back up. You're not going to pick 11 players. That's not going to make a lot of sense. You're not going to have roster spots for them, but you do have room for 7 or 8 guys. So move back from 28 and then start being a little bit more specific about moving up, maybe in the 3rd round, maybe in the 2nd round. That's kind of my appetite for the Bills and the draft right now. So there you have that piece. Let's talk about the Bills AFC East rivals first, because step 1 is winning your division. That's how you guarantee yourself at least one home playoff game. And pretty much your Super Bowl winners are teams that win their division. And so you got to take care of that. I know the Bills have done that the last 4 years in a row. And the Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots are fully aware of that. They're surely tired of it. I'm sure they want to knock the Bills down. So let's talk about their problems and what's going on. We'll start with the Miami Dolphins, who ended the 2023 season 2nd in the AFC East. They had an 11-6 record. Of course, they had a 3-game lead in the division with 5 to play. The Bills were able to overcome that and win the division for a 4th consecutive year. The Dolphins went on to play the Chiefs in the playoffs in Arrowhead. They lost that game. As far as coaching changes goes for the Miami Dolphins, defensive coordinator is what's going to be different this year. Vic Fangio out as the defensive coordinator. It's described as mutually agreeing to part ways. Sounds like there was some real friction between Fangio and his appetite for playing some of the younger guys, maybe not getting some of the players that he anticipated getting for his unit. Didn't feel like it was a very collaborative situation with Fangio. All of the messaging coming out of Miami says that. They've replaced him with Anthony Weaver, who's been the defensive line coach for the Baltimore Ravens, had a few different looks for defensive coordinator jobs. I think he's had some head coaching interviews as well. He's highly regarded as an up-and-coming, coach in the league that's had, of course, a lot of success during his time with the Ravens. He was the Bills defensive line coach the year under Rex Ryan, I think, where they had like 3 or 4 different double-digit sack guys. He's a good coach. It feels like a good hire for them at defensive coordinator. But that's their big change when it comes to coaching staff. In terms of their cap position, as of 5 o'clock on Sunday, March 10th, they're $23 million over the cap. There's different levers that they can pull, obviously, to get cap compliant. But right now, they're sitting at $23 million over. In terms of their expiring contracts, they've got some stuff to deal with here. They have 3 starters on their offensive line that are expiring contracts. They're starting left guard, Isaiah Wynn, starting center, Connor Williams, or starting right guard, Robert Hunt. And honestly, their best backup offensive lineman, Kendall Lamb, also an expiring contract. I think the expectation is that Robert Hunt's going to walk in free agency, and he could get a free agent deal that's going to pay him, $17-18 million a season. He's a very good player. So the Dolphins very much probably needing to replace multiple players on the interior of that offensive line. Connor Williams tore his ACL, their outstanding center, and his market obviously is impacted by that. Their nose tackle, Raekwon Davis, an expiring contract. Christian Wilkins, their star defensive tackle, is an expiring contract. And I feel like the expectation there is that he's going to sign elsewhere. It's been a lengthy process with the negotiations with Wilkins. Feels like he's wanting to maximize every dollar. Feels like maybe the Dolphins are a little bit reluctant to give him big money within this defensive tackle boom that's been happening over the last couple of years with Quinnen Williams, Justin Matabweek, Justin Simmons, of course, Chris Jones, and the massive contract that he just got. I feel like Miami's prepared to let Christian Wilkins walk. On the edge, Andrew Van Ginkel is an expiring contract, and that's pretty significant because they're two starting edge rushers, Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, who are good players. They're both coming back off of injury, one with an ACL tear, one with an Achilles tear. Both of those happened later in the season, and so the start of the season very much in jeopardy for those two edge defenders. They're going to come back probably mid-season, and to be very much kind of what the Bills dealt with Trey White, and what that looks like to come back in the middle of the season. Sometimes that's a little bit tough. So I think Andrew Van Ginkel becomes a very high priority for them to get back. And then starting safety to Sean Elliott, and then a guy that's been a starting safety for them throughout the years, Brandon Jones. So there's other expiring contracts, but those are the big names. Not to mention they cut in cap clearing moves as cap casualties. Jerome Baker, starting linebacker, Xavier Howard, starting cornerback. So they've got plenty of holes to fill. When it comes to their needs and their big items to pay attention to this offseason, it really starts with Tua Tagovailoa, their quarterback, and their contract extension. Right now, he's playing on the fifth-year option, which means it's a hard cap hit. I'm sure they would love to extend him, bring that cap hit down, get some extra space this year, and, of course, lock in Tua. And that's a tough decision because Tua's been really productive for them. But at the same time, I think you can understand that he benefits so much from that scheme. He benefits from the Waddle and Hill, and he's not necessarily a guy that you look at and feel like he can elevate players around him. And, what is he like in those clutch moments, those gotta-have-it moments, those franchise quarterback moments, right? He hasn't really shown much in those instances, not to mention the injury history. I know he was healthy last year, which was great for him, but pretty much the previous 4 or 5 seasons and going back to Alabama, he's not been durable. Now, I know he's bulked up. He's done different things to help himself maximize his availability with, learning how to fall, something as simple as that. I know you can make fun of that, but learning how to fall is a big deal, and was important. You saw that show up in his game last year, but that Tua situation is going to be interesting. I mean, that extension, based on where the quarterback market is heading, based on the production that he's had over the last couple of years, that's well north of $50 million a season. And it seems like they're prepared to do that. So that's a big ticket item number one for the Miami Dolphins. Then they need to figure out their entire interior offensive line. They need to figure out their edge situation, as I talked about with Chubb and Phillips coming back off of significant injuries. They're going to need to bring back Andrew Van Ginkel and add their defensive tackle. They're going to have to probably rework that a little bit. Christian Wilkins no longer back. They do have Zach Sealer, who's a stud on a very good deal, but also, they're starting nose tackle Raekwon Davis. So they're going to need to put some things around Zach Sealer on that defensive line. They need a starting linebacker to go with David Long now that Jerome Baker's gone. We'll see what happens at corner opposite of Jalen Ramsey. Xavier Howard is no longer with them. They drafted Cam Smith in the second round. Perhaps that's their plan there, but a very unproven player. They need to get their safety starter opposite of Javon Holland figured out. They need wide receiver depth behind Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I mean, I think they're top 3 backups to them, maybe top 4 backups to them last year, all expiring contracts. Now, they have already added Jonnu Smith, a free agent tight end in free agency. I think he's a good fit for that offense, yards after catch, speed. I think he'll bring something to that offense. So that's a good signing for them. As for draft capital, they have a first-round pick, number 21 overall, a second-round pick, number 55 overall. Then they don't have a 3 or a 4. They have a 5th, 2 6th, and a 7th. So they pick 21, 55, and then not again until 157. So you could see the Dolphins as a trade-back team. Obviously, they haven't really had a ton of draft capital over the last couple of years as they've traded away draft picks for Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb. They lost draft picks for the tampering stuff with Stephen Ross. They lost a 1 and a 3 there. So they need some rookie labor to kind of balance out their roster. And so they got a lot to figure out this offseason. Obviously, last year, going into the year, I kept on saying I think the Dolphins are the biggest threat to the Bills in the East, and that was even with Aaron Rodgers healthy with the Jets. And we'll see how it all plays out. Obviously, they have a lot of dynamic players, but plenty of holes to fill and not a ton of resources to fill them. So Chris Greer, their general manager, is going to have to be very creative to get this roster right. And, they're trying to get over the hump too. The Bills are trying to get over the hump, a different hump, right? Obviously, this Chiefs hump, go all the way. The Dolphins are trying to get over the Bills hump. That's not been a very good situation for Miami. I think the Bills have won 13 of the last 15 against the Dolphins. I'm sure they're tired of it. I know they're tired of it. I know they are. And so, the Bills want to kind of keep them at an arm's reach. And I think that the Dolphins would love to obviously get over their hump. Their hump is the Bills. And so you got to be mindful of that as you continue to stay on top of this division. All right, so the Dolphins out of the way. We're talking Jets, Patriots here in just a second. So be sure to stick with me. Patience, drive, and passion. What brings home the winning trophy is also what brings home your number one ride or die. It keeps it alive. So check it out. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, folks, in this segment, we're talking Jets and Patriots. Then we're going to get to the Bengals and the Chiefs. Next up is the Jets. Ended 2023 at 7-10, third place in the AFC East. Their coaching staff, no major changes. They're bringing back Robert Saleh as the head coach, Jeff Ulbrich as the defensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett as the offensive coordinator. Their cap position right now is they have $21 million in available cap space. Of course, with every team, there's levers they can pull to get more, but as of the recording of this podcast, $21 million in space. In terms of expiring contracts, several on the offensive line. Mekhi Becton, who's a starting tackle for them, Dwayne Brown, Billy Turner, Connor McGovern, who's been a starting center for them. And so offensive line's a big deal here. Plus, they cut Laken Tomlinson, who's been their most durable starting offensive lineman over the years. So we'll get to it, but this offensive line, they need like 3 starters. They need, expiring contracts, defensive tackle, Quentin Jefferson, one of their starters, a key backup, and Solomon Thomas. On the edge, Bryce Huff, who's a very good pass rusher for them. Carl Lawson, who kind of fell out of that rotation last season. And then at safety, Jordan Whitehead. I think they actually cut him. And then Ashton Davis, young player that has been flashy, but more special teams after starting his first season. So the Jets needs, they got a lot of things they got to figure out. First of all, it's all about Aaron Rodgers coming back. You know what happened, 5 snaps in or whatever. He tears his Achilles. He misses the entire season. And the Jets from there, never really were in position to meet the expectations that they had. They need to get some wide receiver stuff figured out. They have Garrett Wilson and then nothing. Like Alan Lazard, to me, he's a bozo wide receiver in the NFL. Doesn't bring anything. So they literally have Garrett Wilson and really not much else at all at receiver. They need some real answers there. In terms of their offensive line, I think they need 3 starters. They got Joe Tippmann, who was a second-round pick, who's probably going to start at center. They have Elijah Vera Tucker, who's very good when he's healthy, but it feels like 3 years in a row he's had like a major season-ending injury. So you feel like those are 2 of their starters, but they need 3 more starters and then like several backups. So they got a good defense. They got Aaron Rodgers. They need some wide receiver talent. They need a ton on the offensive line. I think they need to retool their defensive tackle room a little bit. They have Quinnen Williams, of course, but already mentioned Quentin Jefferson, Solomon Thomas, kind of their next 2 best players there, expiring contracts. And then they'll need a starting safety to go with Chuck Clark as well. So a lot to figure out for the Jets who you feel like there's a lot of desperation there. They've been last place in the division like several years in a row. I know they weren't last year, but like bottom 2 in the division. They haven't really been much of a needle mover. They got to do it this year. They got to figure something out, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, how much can he elevate this at his age? Never playing for this team really, and coming off injury. We'll see. In terms of draft capital, they have a first-round pick and then a third-round pick, 2 4s, 2 6s, 2 7s. So they have pick 10, 72, 110, and 112 in terms of their premium draft picks. It's all about Aaron Rodgers. It's about that defense coming back and, being the Jets defense that they're supposed to be. Aaron Rodgers, and then they got to get an offensive line. They got to get some wide receiver talent for Aaron Rodgers to work with. New England Patriots. They finished 2023 4-13. Glad the Bills can give them one of those wins. That one still pisses me off. I'm not going to lie. That game pisses me off so much. 4-13. They finished last in the AFC East. Their coaching staff is different. Bill Belichick, no longer the head coach of the New England Patriots. Jerod Mayo, who's been a long-time defensive coach for them. He played linebacker for them. He's their new head coach. Alex Van Pelt comes over from Cleveland to be their offensive coordinator. DeMarcus Covington is their defensive coordinator, who has been a defensive assistant in New England since 2017. So Belichick's gone, but you still feel like so many of the pillars of their front office and coaching staff remain. So we'll see how different this actually is, but Jerod Mayo kind of just stepping into that spot. Their cap position, they got a ton of cap space, $82 million in cap space. That's second most in the NFL. Expiring contracts, the big ones, wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, who was off to a great season last year. He tore his ACL about midway through. Both of their starting offensive tackles, Trent Brown and Mike Onwenu, are expiring contracts. Mike Onwenu is a very good player. Ezekiel Elliott at running back. Anthony Jennings, a hybrid edge player for them. And then Josh Uche, who's a very good speed rusher for them. It's not a ton of expiring contracts, but they do have a lot of needs. They got to get better, right? This roster has to get better. That's been my issue with the Patriots for a number of years now. For as much as they talk about their coaching staff and on the floor of this team and all that, when you match it up, whenever you look at the matchups with the Patriots, you're just like, you got a problem here because your players aren't that dynamic. Like, they just need to get better players. There's not much about that roster that has really concerned me over the years. And so there's a lot of turnover here. You would feel like with their cap space, with their draft capital, they're going to be able to really add to this roster. In terms of their needs, it starts at quarterback. They just traded away Mac Jones to the Jaguars. They got the number 3 pick in the draft. And so there's this crop of quarterbacks in Caleb Williams, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels. Surely the Patriots are going to come away with one of them, right? At pick number 3. You'd like to think, if you're a Patriots fan, that's what I would want. I don't know if they're going to be in on a guy like Russ Wilson or some of these other veterans that are floating around, Jacoby Brissett, whatever they're going to do. To me, at number 3, they got to get a quarterback. They need 2 starting offensive tackles. I don't think Trent Brown's back, and we'll see about Mike Onwenu, who's representing himself in free agency as his own agent. That should be interesting. I think they need some wide receiver talent. But I think they just got to get more dynamic players. I think one thing that can't be overlooked in the Patriots is that they get 2 big-time players back from injury. Matthew Judon, who's a very good defensive end, and Christian Gonzalez, who was their first-round pick last year. I mean, he was on a path that you started to think about this guy being the defensive rookie of the year. Then his season got abruptly ended. But those are going to be 2 huge pieces to get back for their football team. Not to mention the second most cap space in the NFL and a ton of draft capital. So they have picks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2 in the 6th round and the 7th round. But they have picks 3, 34, right? Those are big-time draft picks, 68, 102, and 136. So between their cap space and their, those draft picks, there should be a lot of talent infused into this New England Patriots roster. They need it. But they got to get the quarterback thing right. That's going to be important for them. Mac Jones didn't work out. completely unsurprising to me. They really didn't do a good job of building around him with coaching or talent. Here comes their next guy, the number 3 pick, probably. We'll see. We'll see. You never know with the Patriots. But they're going to have a nice opportunity to add to this roster, and boy, oh boy, do they need to. All right, folks, we're talking Chiefs. We're talking Bengals here on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with me. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 just to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. They've got footballs, futures, bets, hockey, whatever you're looking for. You can find it over at FanDuel. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, folks, let's talk Bengals and Chiefs. And I wanted to do the AFC East, but for as much as the Bills got the AFC East to deal with, yeah, the Bengals and Chiefs to deal with. So let's talk about them. We'll do the Chiefs first. They ended 2023 11-6. They won the Super Bowl. 3rd time in 5 years they've done that. The Chiefs are a dynasty. They are a problem. For as much as we talk about the Bills and what they needed to get over the hump, and your questions about Sean McDermott and the defense, whatever you want to point to, you know what the Bills' biggest problem is? That Patrick Mahomes is alive and in his prime. Like, can we just call it what it is? It's Patrick Mahomes. The dude's the best player in the NFL. He meets every moment. You got to play really great to beat him. And we have a lot of conversations about the Bills that, can we just call it what it is? They got a Patrick Mahomes problem. And it's not just the Bills. 31 teams have a Patrick Mahomes problem. Whether it's, look at the 49ers in the NFC. They lost to this guy twice in the Super Bowl. And twice they had a lead. Like, decent lead. So you can have the opinions that you want about Sean McDermott, the pass rush, whatever you want to point to, whatever your frustrations are with the Bills. The problem is that Patrick Mahomes is in his prime, and he's the best player in the world, and he plays quarterback. If Patrick Mahomes wasn't in the NFL right now, what does it look like? That's your problem. Patrick Mahomes is your problem. All right. Nothing changes with the Chiefs coaching staff. Of course, it's all the same. They've got $1.3 million in cap space. I think that is factoring in the massive contract extension for Chris Jones. And of course, yeah, they got a big franchise tag number there for Sneed, their outstanding cornerback. In terms of expiring contracts, Donovan Smith at left tackle, Nick Allegretti, who's an important interior offensive line reserve, Derek Nottie, who's one of their longest tenured players, their starting nose tackle, Mike Dana, very good starting defensive end for them, Willie Gay, one of their linebackers. They did bring back Drew Tranquill already. They have Nick Bolton and Leo Chenal. You could see Willie Gay probably leaving in free agency. Sneed, they tagged him. They're obviously looking to trade him perhaps. I heard the price tag. I'm sure you all have heard the price tag there. Could be a second-round pick, and you're probably thinking to yourself, that's crazy. L'Jarius Sneed's one of the best young cornerbacks in the NFL. Why would he be available for just a second-round pick? Well, he's got a pretty significant knee injury that I think concerns teams long-term. Obviously, the Chiefs have had him around. They're well acquainted with that knee. And so I think you look at a guy like Sneed and you feel like he's probably the best young corner in the NFL, and he deserves a bunch of money. And if you traded him away, that should get you a couple of first-round picks. That knee thing is a big deal, kind of like forecasting him long-term. And so I think they'd like to trade him. And that's what the Chiefs have done, right? Because they've had the success that they do, they have so much freedom to operate and make these types of decisions. Because you might not win your 4th Super Bowl in 6 years. Like, come on. So I think they would love to not have to pay him that franchise tag number, get a second-round pick, draft some other corner to go with Josh Williams and Trenton McDuffie and move on with their lives. Mike Edwards, a depth safety, and Tommy Townsend, who I think is one of the best punters in the league. They just signed Matt Ariza, so that might not be a good sign that Tommy Townsend's back. They might not be interested in paying him top punter money. So there's that. Of course, they just signed Chris Jones to that massive contract extension. The Chiefs have needs, but they do have Patrick Mahomes. So you kind of put your palms in the air and say, does any of this matter? Because they have Patrick Mahomes. They could certainly get better at wide receiver. I'd expect that to happen. They cut Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Kadarius Toney's been a flop for them. You know, Rashee Rice looks like a nice young player. We'll see what they have in Sky Moore. They definitely need some wide receiver talent. They need a left tackle. Maybe that's Wanye Morris, a player they drafted last year who started a few games. But whether it's a starting left tackle or some more offensive line depth, they need to figure that out. I think they need some running back depth to go with Isaiah Pacheco. They got a couple of expiring contracts there. They need some defensive line answers. Mike Dana, expiring contract. And then, of course, Charles Omenihu, who's one of their starting edge rushers. He tore his ACL late in the season, so you kind of wonder what that looks like for him to start 2024. So they're going to need an answer there. They do have Felix Uzoma, who was their first-round pick in 2023. Didn't really do anything as a rookie. Sure, they're counting on him for more in 2024. And then they'll need some answers at cornerback if they do trade L'Jarius Sneed. So I think for them, it's wide receiver, left tackle, depth at running back and D-line, and then, you know, you could create a pretty big hole for yourselves at cornerback. Draft capital, they have a first, second, third, fourth, and 2 fifth-round picks. So their marquee picks are 32, 64, 95, and 131. Cincinnati Bengals, they ended 2023 9-8. That's actually last in the NFC or the AFC North. Their coaching staff is a little bit different because they lost their offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan, to be the Titans head coach. They promoted Dan Pitcher to be their offensive coordinator. He's been an offensive assistant with the Bengals since 2016. He's been their quarterback's coach since 2020. So very much a guy that's well acquainted with Joe Burrow. Their cap position right now, they're sitting at about $48.5 million. That's eighth most in the NFL. They got some expiring contracts. Tyler Boyd, their long-term slot receiver there. Of course, they put the franchise tag on T. Higgins. Jonah Williams, they're starting right tackle. All 4 of their tight ends, their entire tight end depth chart, expiring contracts. DJ Reader, their outstanding nose tackle, and Chidobe Awuzie, one of their starting corners, but they did rotate DJ Turner with him last year, so they might have already kind of had their answer in place there at cornerback. So what do they need? They need a right tackle. Jonah Williams, I don't think will be back, so they're going to need to find an answer there. They need a starting tight end and all of the backups, right? They need a whole new tight end room. I think they probably want to ask themselves some questions about the interior offensive line. It's a good draft. There's a ton of good free agents on the interior offensive line. Cordell Volson's kind of been okay at left guard. Ted Karras at center. I feel like those are upgradable spots. Joe Mixon, there's a thought that he could be released at running back. So they drafted Chase Brown last year. They're probably going to need some running back depth. I think interior defensive line's a spot. If DJ Reader's not back, they need a starter there. I think they can use some interior pass rush as well, as Zach Carter hasn't really come along at all. Recent draft pick that they made out of Florida. I think they will need some cornerback depth. I think Cam Taylor Britt and DJ Turner is a good young pair of corners, but they probably want to have some veteran depth in that room to go with them. So their draft capital, Cincinnati always just they never make any trades. So their picks are always exactly what they're supposed to be. So they have all of their original picks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they have 2 compensatory picks in the 6th round. So 3 6s, and then their original pick in all 7 rounds. Their premier picks are 18, 49, 80, and 114. So that's the breakdown. That's those are the biggest problems, I think, for the Bills in the AFC, of course, being mindful of the entire division. Bengals, Chiefs, there's other things going on. Baltimore's a really good team. The Chargers will, Jim Harbaugh there and Justin Herbert. Houston looks like they're a bright young team. But these are the teams that I think are the most important for the Bills to be thinking about as they move forward with the new league year. Now, one thing that I will point out in terms of the draft capital, because I went through it with all the teams, tankathon.com has something really cool. It's called the Draft Capital Power Rankings. And you're probably familiar with this, but the way that teams do trades of draft picks is that there's a point value assigned to every single one of them. And so obviously the first overall pick is worth a ton. And then it's descending from there. Every single pick is worth a little bit less. But you could take all of your picks and you could take the point value assigned to each of your picks, and it gives you a number. And when it comes to the draft capital power rankings, so the value of all your picks added together, I wanted to show you where each of these teams fall, and of course, where the Bills fall. So 5th in the NFL in terms of draft capital, right? Value of draft capital is the New England Patriots. They got a lot, obviously, with pick 3 and 34. Then of these 6 teams, so the 5 we talked about plus the Bills are next in terms of draft capital power rankings at 14th. The Bengals at 15, the Jets at 22, the Chiefs at 28, and the Dolphins at 31. And so as we think about the draft being the lifeblood of these teams and really, really critical, it's nice to know that among these teams, at least, the Bills have the second most draft capital, of course, nowhere near what the New England Patriots have. All right, folks, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy the week ahead. It's going to be busy. It's going to be fun. Make sure that you are subscribed. Join the Locked On Bills subtext community. As always, I'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I'll be catching up with you a ton this week. It's going to be fun, so stick with me.